Excellent. So I'm going to give just a few minutes just while we let people populate to the room. As Emma said, it's always that that moment of online panels where you wait for people to come in. So starting in a few minutes. Okay, I think we'll get started now. So hello, everyone. My name's Nik Williams. I'm the Policy and Campaigns Officer at Index and Censorship, a UK-based NGO that protects and defends freedom of expression across the globe. Thank you for attending this launch event for our recent report. I mean, I say recent, it's hot off the presses. It was published today, Whom to Serve, How the CCP Censors Art in Europe. You won't hear a lot from me because we're here to hear from this incredible panel, but I will start with a few house rules and then we can kick off with a testimony from Lumli Lumlong. So throughout the session, you can ask questions or contribute to the chat on either the Q&A or the chat function, which you should find at the bottom of your Zoom window. There you can chat. You can ask a question or answer. You can also do that anonymously as well, so don't feel like you need to give your name as appropriate, and I will make sure to bring up questions, and there will be a question and answer session at the end. I'll also let you know that this session is being recorded, so it will be published after the fact, so you can relive it or you can share it with colleagues, but I just wanted everyone to be aware of it being recorded. So just a little bit of background into the project. So this is part of the Index on Censorship project called Banned by Beijing, which is a project funded and supported by the National Endowment of Democracy. So basically, with China becoming an increasingly dominant world power, there's growing evidence that a emboldened Chinese Communist Party, or the CCP, is employing a range of tactics aimed at pressuring or manipulating foreign entities to respect or align with their political agenda. And there are a number of examples about this across a number of different disciplines that intersect with freedom of expression. For example, sanctions have been imposed on a British academic for decrying human rights abuses in Xinjiang. Demands were made of a French history museum to remove certain words from an exhibition about Genghis Khan, and that is actually mentioned in Whom to Serve, the report we published today. And there are threats sent to a think tank director in response to his report exposing Slovak universities' links to Chinese institutions. So Banned by Beijing really seeks to raise awareness of potential subversion of freedom of expression by the CCP in countries in Europe. It is a project that looks at the intersection of CCP censorship and soft power in European countries. For example, this report looks at EU member states as well as the UK. And so as part of this project, we will create a repository of reports. We've done two previous reports, one looking at the censorship of the Uyghur diaspora in Europe, and the other looking at the impact of Confucius Institutes in, again, extending soft power through European universities, as well as a series of articles. And these can all be found on the Index website, which my colleague Emma has very kindly put into the chat function. We've also had a number of recent articles, one looking at junket journalism, as well as looking at the CCP's manipulation of UN process during in regards to the recent Uyghur report. So this is just trying to gain a more accurate picture as to the influence of CCP in Europe and how it impacts on freedom of expression. And so this report looks at one of the core freedoms that Index has spent years looking at, which is artistic freedom, and how free artists are able to complete their work. And I'm going to start with two quotes that came from either the report or some of the interviews, because I think they really frame the conversation really well. is, so if a painting can overthrow a government, then the government must be very fragile. And that came from Lumli Lumlong. And I think it's a very interesting idea of how, when we look at art, because art is incredibly powerful, but states should be able to endure anything that's critical. And art is a very powerful vehicle through which to challenge consolidated power, information vacuums, etc., etc. But the other quote is obviously maybe speaks to the other side of this, which is how to protect the freedom of the individual, including that of the artist, when the limits of government power are ever expanding, is a question for the whole world. And that came from Chiang Seta, another artist who we interviewed for this report. So Hume looks at the intersection between CCP soft power and artistic freedom in a number of ways. It looks at how the different tools that the CCP has used, whether this is deploying diplomatic power to pressure institutions, whether it is funneling funds into alternate art forms to try to challenge dissident voices, whether this is using financial pressure to encourage people to step back, as well as examples of direct surveillance, intimidation, and sometimes physical attacks to, again, encourage artists to step away. And these are looking at in two broad categories of direct censorship and the encouragement of self-censorship. But also one of the aspects of the project we were keen to look at is also how artists themselves use art to challenge the CCP, because it is a tool that may be used for a lot of different reasons. And we didn't want this to be artists sort of having to endure all this. We also have uncovered lots of really powerful and profound examples of how artists have used their agency, their creativity to challenge, whether that be censorship, surveillance, or so forth. And I think that's a really nice way of working toward introducing Lumli Lumlong. They'll give a short testimony. I will also maybe ask some questions afterwards. But Lumli Lumlong were born into working class families, and they studied fine art together in France. Most of their artwork, which has been exhibited and collected by individuals in Hong Kong, Paris, London, Sydney, New York, Dublin, and Prague, is mostly oil paints in a grotesque style with a shared aim, revealing social realities. They have published their collection of artwork entitled Liberation of Art, and were lecturers of oil painting at the School of Continuing and Professional Studies at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. They were repeatedly criticized by the pro-Chinese Communist Party media for allegedly violating the national security law and using art to advocate for Hong Kong independence. And in 2021, they fled Hong Kong to the UK. So Lumli Lumlong, the floor, or the digital floor, is yours, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, this is Lumli Lumlong.
I'm Lumlong, and thank you so much for inviting us. It's an honor to share our story here today.
Yeah, and we are a Hong Kong artist duo who have created socially engaged work for over 10 years now. And under the rule of CCP, we are often suppressed by our government and pro-CCP supporters. So in 2021, we fled Hong Kong to the UK. There were proximate and remote causes for fleeing Hong Kong. And in May 2021, we held an exhibition at Hong Kong Arts Center. And some pro-CCP reporters who reported on us came under pretense to our exhibition to visit us and bought our painting albums.
Yes, we fled Hong Kong to the UK last year because the pro-CCP newspaper reported criticized us 4 times within a year. So they said we were suspected of violating the Hong Kong national security law, and just because of our painting, it's totally ridiculous. They also said we always use arts to use the name of arts to advocate Hong Kong independence. So the police even came to our studio to threaten us. I still remember the police said, there is a case about you both. And then I asked him, what case is it? And then he said, I can't tell you, but I'll be back, just like the Terminator. Yeah, so we fled Hong Kong in a very short period of time. So we even couldn't tell our our family, we were living, because one of our relatives is
Work for
national security police. So yes, we miss our family and miss Hong Kong so much.
Yeah, and I remember that 10 minutes after the police left our studio, there was a man who looked like a triad gangster, and he rudely rang our doorbell and waved a big stick in front of us. So we were scared while watching CCTV. And one of our painting albums is Liberation of Art was listed as banned book. And we know that if our government wants to arrest you, and the pro-CCP media will write about you first. So we thought we would be arrested sooner or later. But we didn't tell my father to leave Hong Kong until we arrived in the UK safely, because there are many informers who work for CCP for money. So we know some Hong Kong people had been arrested at the airport and could not leave Hong Kong. So we thought it was too dangerous. And I'm sorry that because my father has lung cancer, and I'm afraid that I will never be able to visit him in my lifetime. And we also felt guilty because many of our friends, they had been arrested and they are suffering in prisons now. And looking back at 2015, because we participated in Tibetan Cultural Festival. So picture number 2, please.
Is it possible to show the picture 2? Yes. Yes, this is the first one. This is number 1. Yes,
Yeah,
number 2. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, because we participated in Tibetan Cultural Festival, and someone set fire to a back staircase, and we were scared because we just commemorated the peaceful Tibetan self-immolators. And during the opening of the festival, a group of uniformed people, they're getting off a coach to our exhibition, and they rudely pushed us and led us to stand in front of our paintings, and they took picture of us, and they were hostile and criticized us for disrupting social order, and their actions were well organized. And in 2018, our Facebook accounts were banned, and this year our Facebook account and Instagram account were banned again. And picture number 3, please. Yes. You see that?
Yes, actually, our Facebook account and Instagram account and WhatsApp account were banned by Facebook a few months ago. Although we are in the UK, in London, the hacker hacked into our accounts and changed our username. He or she opened a group and invited our followers to join. It was so scary. At that time, we were having an exhibition an exhibition of Hong Kong nationhood in London. We can't prove these things are related, but actually we believe so. Yeah. So we still need to be careful in using our social medias. But as we said before, as painters, we think we have the advantage to avoid the AI text censor on the internet, because it's more difficult to censor a painting than a word. I think so. Our tactic is paint more, write less.
Yeah, because a picture paints 1,000 words. And then we complained to Facebook, but had no response. Yeah. So, and his WhatsApp account was also banned. In a nutshell, we were in bad luck because everything happened within a month and we lost 3 accounts. But in fact, social media is important to us because it is like a window for us to communicate with Hong Kong people and family. And we also need to use it to present our artwork and promote our online store. So it has been a severe blow to our livelihoods when we lost 3 accounts at the same time. So how to protect censorship to protect us. So we think sometimes we use homophones. That means such as we use Big Six instead of China, because these two words are homophones in Cantonese. They have same pronunciation, which Hong Kong people can understand. And for the reasons just mentioned, that we lived in fear in Hong Kong and couldn't create artwork under such great pressure and often practiced self-censorship. So in June 2021, we secretly closed our painting studio and shipped our large painting and then fled Hong Kong. And now we are in the UK and we miss Hong Kong so much.
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, I would say we didn't choose to be political artists. We just thought we need to respond to the injustice happened, and we just want to tell the truth. So actually, we don't think our artwork poses any threat to the CCP. It just yes, just we said before. As we said before, if a painting can overthrow a government, then the government must be very fragile. So why the Chinese government is so scared of everything, even a white paper, you know? The answer is simple, because they've done too many evil things to oppress their people.
Yeah. If our government have done nothing wrong, why should they be scared? Why can't they accept our paintings? Our government is so fragile and their hearts are made of glass. So we don't know which red line we have crossed, but we just know that our government control the rule of law by taking laws into their own hands. And the rule of law just depends on our government's mood. And besides that, our painting have exhibited in different countries. So perhaps in the eyes of CCP, we were charged with the crime of collusion with foreign forces. Okay, picture number 4, please.
Yeah, we have participated in different exhibitions in Europe since last year until now. And this was an exhibition in Prague a few months ago. It was such an honor for us to have an exhibition with Jens. Yeah, Jens. Yeah. And now we are trying hard to be a full-time artist in the UK, although we know that is not easy, but we think we have the responsibility to tell the whole world what happened in Hong Kong. And because as Lumli said, we have friends, they are now still in prison in Hong Kong. So, and I think the important thing is we need to continue to use our art to tell the whole world how CCP undermines human rights and threatens the whole the world order. We Hong Kongers are not the only victims. We all have a mutual enemy, the CCP. Yeah.
Yeah, and we are happy that we participated in 14 exhibitions this year, and we are happy that to meet many artist friends, including UK, Burma, Thailand, Ukraine, etc. And I think this is Milk Tea Alliance. Milk Tea Alliance is not just an online pro-democracy movement, but we also have practical group exhibitions. I think it is not enough for us to work hard alone. We should collaborate with other countries and enhance our power to fight with the totalitarian monster. And because we have mutual enemy, this is a threat of the infiltration of CCP. So we should collaborate. And in the UK, we hope to preserve our own culture and integrate it with British culture. And hopefully the next generation will never forget the past and prevent some people from rewriting history and brainwashing us. So yeah. So we have cultural responsibility to do so. And I love the Irish poet William Butler Yeats, and he said, in dreams begin responsibilities. So to conclude, I'm sorry to tell you that I never felt for a moment that I was completely safe, either in Hong Kong or the UK, because we are worried about our family, and we have family in Hong Kong are still within reach of the informers and pro-CCP media, and we don't want our family to become hostages. But however, as I said, that if we stop doing something about Hong Kong, then leaving Hong Kong is meaningless. So, and I love the movie quote from V for Vendetta. It says, ideas are bulletproof. Ideas are bulletproof. So we really hope that in the future we can express more freely in this land of freedom.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's really interesting talking about the Milk Tea Alliance as this movement that's endured and has evolved from online, sort of an online democracy and human rights movement. So that's a really powerful message. And just some of the things that you said there, one thing I wanted to ask that jumped out at me was when you said, we don't know which red lines we have crossed. And that seems to be a very challenging issue, because if you don't know where the red lines are, you may not move at all. And just from your opinion, so does this make you more worried covering certain topics, or how do you respond to not knowing where these red lines are?
So I think in Hong Kong, after the national security law was enacted, we create less, or even we create some picture we did not post on our social media. So I'm sorry to say that no matter how brave we are, we still have fear at the bottom of our hearts. So now when we are in the UK, we hope we could express more freely. Like we did a painting last month. It is about the national the anti-extradition movement in 2019, and then we paint a scene of police brutality and depicting police that with a gun and stepping on protesters' head, and also a protester waving a flag and with a slogan that written liberate Hong Kong and revolution of our times. I think if we are in Hong Kong, we cannot do so.
We think we will shut up.
Yes, so
but I think in the UK, we need to speak more. We need to speak, because if we shut up in the UK, why don't we just go back to Hong Kong? So we need to do so. Yeah.
We should have breakthrough in the UK.
Yeah.
Thank you. And you mentioned it here. You spoke about the role of pro-CCP newspapers in the threats that you faced before leaving to the UK. For people who don't know about the sort of control of the media there, how can these media outlets sort of extend the censorship regime? You know, how does that happen?
Let me take an example, because we told you the story that the pro-CCP media criticized us after our exhibition in May 2021. So then we were scared and we fled Hong Kong. But the story is, in the past, we collaborate with 10 yellow shops in Hong Kong to sell our paintings. But in October 2021, we have been criticized by the pro-CCP media again. They criticized us for helping to develop the yellow economic circle. And you know, the yellow economic circle means supporting protesters and sustaining the livelihood of the pro-democracy business owners and staffs. So after the pro-CCP news that criticized us that the yellow shop owners suspend for our cooperation. And of course, we absolutely have no complaint because we think they were more dangerous than us, and we're afraid that they will be arrested in Hong Kong. So we need to find a new yellow shop to collaborate in the UK. So if you are often suppressed by CCP and you know their style and how they roll, first, they made you leave Hong Kong. Then they made you to face the financial difficulties. So we have to be careful with them.
Yes, and I would like to add something that just like what we said before. Yeah, if the CCP want to arrest you, the pro-CCP newspaper will write about you first. So it's a warning for us to leave Hong Kong, because I think that they can't arrest everyone, but they just maybe they just want to threaten you and then want you to stop or want you to leave. I don't know. But yeah, so it's invisible. It depends on the case. We have no choice. So we have to be careful, especially on the internet. Or because we are safe. Actually, although we are safer in the UK, we are totally safe. So we need to be on the internet. Yeah, just as I the AI text center on the internet. Yes.
Thank you so much. I think your internet connection is a little bit breaking up. I think we heard the last part of that. So thank you so much, and thank you for giving us this testimony. I think it's a really powerful example of artists working in this space, even from the UK. I'm now going to introduce the rest of the panel. Lumli Lumlong, please feel free to stay. But thank you so much. So I'm going to introduce the panel, and then I'll start asking.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So we have Dr. Janet Marstine, who is an honorary associate professor of museum studies, retired at the University of Leicester, and is currently an independent scholar and consultant. She writes on diverse aspects of museum ethics, including negotiating the pressures of curatorial self-censorship, from which emerged her book with S. Micheva, Curating Under Pressure, International Perspectives on Negotiating Conflict and Upholding Integrity, published by Routledge in 2020. Marstine received support from the British Academy for research in Hong Kong between 2015 and 2018, which informed this book. And in 2018, she was a senior research fellow at Fudan University in Shanghai, which also shaped her understanding of curatorial censorship, self-censorship, and creative pursuits of agency. So thank you so much, Janet, for joining us. We have Iverson NG, who is an Estonia-based Hong Kong policy advocate, columnist, and exhibition curator. As a curator, he organized Hong Kong Baltic Way photo exhibitions in Estonia, Lithuania, Czechia, and the US. And as a policy advocate, he testified at the Czech Chamber of Deputies on the Czech-Hong Kong Extradition Treaty and at the European Parliament on the 2-year implementation of the Hong Kong National Security Law. So thank you so much, Iverson. And then we have Jens Galschiøt, who could be characterized as one of the most significant Danish artists of late modernity. His artistic output covers a wide range of expression, from jewelry and small fine figures to giant politically charged sculptures. He is among the best-known Danish artists abroad, and his reputation extends from Hong Kong and Mexico through to Germany, Spain, and the United States. Apart from closing sculptures, Jens creates international happenings to highlight the current imbalances in the world. So Jens, thank you for joining us today. And then we have Michaela Šilpochová, who is the artistic director at DOX Center for Contemporary Art in Prague. Since 2019, she has been responsible for DOX's international interdisciplinary program of exhibitions, literary and performing arts events, as well as lead learning programs. She holds a degree in British literature from the Faculty of Arts at Charles University in Prague, where she also studied art history. Her main interest as a curator is the mutual relationship between visual arts and literature. She has curated and designed numerous exhibitions, including Brave New World in 2015, Havel in 2016, Over My Eyes 2017, On Flying and Other Dreams 2019, Badiou Sao Made in China in 2022. So this is our panel, and we're absolutely delighted to have everyone joining us. As I said before, if anyone has any questions throughout, anyone watching this has any questions throughout, we've got the chat function and the Q&A. We have already had a question asked to us, which is excellent. I'll come to those as we go through the questions. And so I'm actually going to ask a question to Michaela. Because of what happened in DOX with Badiou Sao's exhibition. And I wanted to ask whether you could give a bit of a background as to what happened and how that exhibition how attempts were made to try to stop that exhibition. Because I think it's such a key tactic when we talk about CCP's intervention in Europe.
Okay, so first of all, thank you for having me on this panel. And yes, Badiou Sao's exhibition was organized in Prague in May this year. It was an exhibition that we brought from Brescia, Italy, where already the organizers faced some pressures from the Chinese, local Chinese embassy, who issued a diplomatic note and required the organizers to withdraw the exhibition. So when we decided, and we decided very early on that we wanted to present Badiou Sao's art in Prague, we met Badiou Sao in 2020 while he was in Prague, and he was supposed to speak and present his documentary film on during a human rights film festival. Back then we met and we decided we wanted to present his art at DOX. Then COVID came and everything was changed. And later on, when we learned about this Italian town of Brescia who organized Badiou Sao's show, we went to see it and we decided we wanted to bring it to Prague. And we knew about what happened in Brescia, about the diplomatic pressures. So we sort of expected something like that to happen on the one hand. On the other hand, we also knew what negative publicity it caused around the world, because I think that most of the international media informed about what happened in Brescia. So we thought maybe the local Chinese authorities would refrain from doing a similar thing in Prague. What happened here was, to cut a long story short, really that I received a phone call a day before the exhibition opening on my private number. And it was a lady calling from the local Chinese embassy who required that we withdraw the show, or to be exact, she asked us not to organize the show, as it, according to her, or according to the Chinese authorities, would harm the mutual relationship between China and Czech Republic. And what was very funny, I would say even, was that she said that we would harm the feelings of the Chinese people by organizing this show. So I must say DOX is an independent institution. We are a private institution, and of course we value very much artistic freedoms, especially in a country that has been enjoying artistic freedoms for little more than 3 decades only. This is a country that spent more than 40 years under a communist rule, under a former Soviet control. And so it is, we are very concerned about somebody else touching, artistic freedoms in this country. So when we received this phone call and this pressure, it was something for us, something utterly unacceptable. And of course our response was, this is something we cannot even talk about. This is something we will not be told what to do in a free country, in an artistic institution like DOX. We will definitely not be told by anyone, let alone by anyone from Chinese authorities or embassy, to withdraw a show. So we just organized the show the way it was planned, and it happened, and it was presented in Prague, and it was shown here for 3.5 months.
Thank you so much, Michaela. And I think it's a really interesting case, and also shows how imperfect this attempt at censorship is. DOX were able to resist the pressure, and the exhibition went on. The same thing, as you mentioned, happened in Brescia. They attempted to close it down. They used the same rhetoric, ties between Italy and China, but the gallery resisted. And the mayor of Brescia came out a very strong statement, and the exhibition was able to go on. But, while I say the censorship didn't work, no other gallery in Europe picked up Badiou Sao's exhibition afterwards. So maybe it didn't work in its primary goal, but it may have worked in a secondary goal, which was to intimidate other galleries. And that's maybe shows the complexity of this approach across Europe. And so thank you for that. And Iverson, just for your experience working with artists as a curator across the Baltic states, but also other parts of Europe, when we're talking about artists who are fearful of maybe producing work that's critical of the CCP, or maybe perceived to be critical of the CCP, could you give us a picture of what do you think they actually have to fear? What are the fears that come from challenging these topics?
Thank you for your good question. I think it's very important to talk about the relations between the artists and also the audience, because I think there is a mutually constitutive relations between the two of them. So you cannot have an artist without an audience. So if the audience are actually scared, then that will create a problem for the artist. So that is the first point I would like to address. And then the second issue is, actually it was mentioned in the discussion, is about the lack of partners for collaboration, in which I will illustrate in one of my cases during my experience for organizing all these Hong Kong Badiou exhibitions. So getting to the first point regarding the reaction. So given the context of the 2020 Hong Kong National Security Law, it is very problematic for the Europe-based Hong Kong artists to create anything connected to Hong Kong or China, because an ordinary Hong Kong citizen living abroad will feel that we don't want to, connect to that, because there is a chance otherwise that we will get some issues when we return to Hong Kong. And when I say we, so it is not just about I myself, or let's say more activists like policy advocates. We're talking about ordinary citizens who normally would not like to engage with politics. And I think that is actually discouraging a lot of artists, Hong Kong artists, especially in Europe, to find more inspiration and to get support in order to sustain the ecosystem of the artists, the audience, and also people, Hong Kongers, who are actually concerned about the domestic situation happening in Hong Kong. So that is the first point regarding the fear of the artists. So it is not just about the artists themselves, but also about the bigger ecosystem as a whole. And the second point being also is about the ecosystem, but it's about the partners. So when I organized the Hong Kong Baltic Way exhibitions, it was supposed to happen only within the capitals in the Baltic states, Tallinn, Riga, and Vilnius. But unfortunately, for some reasons, the Occupation Museum of Latvia cancelled the Hong Kong Baltic exhibitions at the very last minute, with the justification of saying that we did not meet their requirement, we did not meet their deadlines. But actually, the facts, as I sent my email correspondence to one of your colleagues in Index on Censorship, that these are actually not the right accusations. So that begs us the question that, so why would the Occupation Museum of Latvia cancel it at the last minute? So a more hands-on reason is that they had some logistical issues. They had to relocate their exhibition at the museum itself. Well, that sounds very logical, but then the response is actually more ambiguous than we thought, because first they claimed, they made a false claim regarding what happened, between the organizations. And secondly, when I communicated to the Latvian Parliament Foreign Affairs Committee that I was warned not to spread the false news about this Chinese influence in terms of artistic freedom in Riga. So for me, it is actually a wet line to show that Chinese influence, or let's say limitations of artistic freedoms in Europe, is not just about something that you can observe it, but actually it's about the perceptions that how people think about China. And this is something that we cannot prove. And I think that makes it very difficult for us to do anything to say whether this freedom is getting limited or not. So that is my point.
Thank you so much. And I think it does hint at that ambiguity and the inability to interrogate and actually understand the decisions that were being made, especially on topics so sensitive. So thank you so much. And actually, we're just going to maybe zoom out a little bit to Dr. Marstine, who's been an expert looking at curatorial self-censorship and the tactics that have been deployed. How much would you say China and the CCP is an outlier? I mean, are there some commonalities with other countries you've seen, or other approaches to artistic freedom, or does the CCP in China stand alone, in your opinion?
No, I think that there are many commonalities with other authoritarian regimes. But not only that, I think that the case studies that we're looking at today and that are in the report also show that it's way too easy to say that censorship happens over there and not here. But in fact, it does happen everywhere, that it has become a global issue, and that we have to look within ourselves. We have to look critically also in democratic countries to see where it's happening, not only from interference from from these autocratic countries, but where we ourselves in museums and galleries in Europe, in the United States, in Japan, for example, need to think critically about our own practices, and who we take money from, and sponsorship, for example, but many other issues, to think about the way that we might use nationalism, and to think about, when I interviewed artists and curators in Hong Kong and China, but also in the UK, it was fascinating to hear the ways that many of them talked about controversy, but being unprepared for controversy, having no plan, having no strategy. And about 50% in a recent MA Museums Association study, about 50% admitted that they had engaged in self-censorship when there was a controversy. So it's much more common than we admit to. But in democratic countries, there is this sense of shame that's aligned with censorship and self-censorship. And so we're never transparent about it. There's silences around it, which make it, of course, much more difficult to understand. If you don't have a record, then how can you possibly begin to combat it, begin to negotiate it? Understanding those invisibilities and tracing those back is very important. So I think that the work that that Index is doing here is extremely important in this front. We also need to understand that we're all implicit here, and we need to be self-reflective. It's not just from the CCP. We have our own weaknesses in democratic countries as well.
Thank you so much. I remember having to campaign for an artist who was getting challenged for work that was falling foul of anti-terrorism laws in the UK about UK involvement in the Middle East, and the exact very similar tactics were being deployed. But also your conversation about so the links between institutions, you know, it's an old school sort of journalistic trait of follow the money, and part of the report, part of the Index report published today, was trying to do exactly that. And we used freedom of information requests in the UK, but also in other parts of Europe. But it's incredibly hard to really get an accurate picture. Most FOI laws don't cover private institutions. Many don't cover art institutions because they would be perceived as arm's length bodies, so may not fall under the jurisdiction. And also, but then how limited galleries are in their own reporting of how much money, what the sources of the money coming in. And this is not to say that the money is dirty, it's just so there's a greater awareness of where the sources come from, and are there any ethical decisions that we need to have. And I would like to turn to Jens now, and it sort of connects to the question raised by Ersan Pekin, which is like the role of trade. And Jens, I know that you were due to speak at an event in Denmark, a panel discussion about your work, but that got pulled, that it got cancelled because of the town's ties to China. But also you face countless sort of threats to your work in Hong Kong. So how does it for you, in your comparison, what would you see are there any parallels between your work as an artist in Europe and your work as an artist in Hong Kong in how you've had to respond to the threats of the CCP?
Yes, we have. It's many years ago. They have this happened with they canceled my speech in the town. It's about 20 years ago. But now we are, like Janet says, we are quite prepared to do something. We know if I put up the pillar of shame, I put it in front of the Danish Parliament for a couple of years ago to support the Hong Kong movement. Then CCP give a note to the state, to the Copenhagen town. And then we immediately we bring it up to the parliament discussion. We have really good connection to a lot of parliament groups. So if such thing happen, then we bring it up to the highest level on the state and say this is a kind of state intervention in Denmark. So and then we force them to answer. I could hear Iverson, you talk about. You have a problem with a cancelled exhibition in Estonia, but if I have such a cancelled, then I use it as a kind of the tools against China and use it kind of a public discussion about censorship in the art and censorship in the Europe, and what China trying to do. So everything I do something like I work in Qatar in the moment. Then we use the Danish Parliament, the European Parliament to make a statement. For example, we should have a European journey about with the big pillar of shame if we get it out in Hong Kong. Then we start the exhibition in the European Parliament, because when we put on the European Parliament, then the Parliament take all this trouble with China. And then it's much easier for us to go to a lot of other towns in Europe, because then we have the whole parliament in the back. So we use this kind of thing as a kind of a tool. And of course, I know we have a big organization about that. I have 10 people employed in my workshop to do this kind of thing. So I'm used to that. But I think the artist must learn to think about the attack from the China must be a part of the art and use it as a kind of a tool to make a discussion about what China is doing, and use it as a kind of art, as a connection to the artwork. It's much easier if you do it in thinking this way. This is what we're doing a lot of time. We have tried that a lot of time. So we're not really, in Europe, we are not really trouble with CCP. We only use them as the tools. And I think they're quite angry on us. So nobody touched me, because when they try to touch me, then we use it, then we fight back with full power. And it was a good success.
It's almost like in the English, we say the Streisand effect, that the banning of something actually makes it more popular, makes it more known. And you see countless examples in different art forms of someone trying to ban something that was maybe quite niche and has a small audience, but as soon as news comes out of it being banned, it suddenly has a massive audience. Which I think is maybe a really powerful message there. But as you say, using this against itself, it also increases the risk of the CCP's intervention, because they know that there will be that response, which I think is a really powerful thing to do. So thank you, Jens. Lumli Lumlong, if it's okay, I may bring you in for a question, because I've seen your work and it's in the report and it's incredibly vivid and incredibly powerful. But I just want to ask, why do you think your artwork poses such a threat to the CCP, in your opinion? I think you're muted.
Yes, sorry. Yeah. I think because people's always said that our artwork are terrifying. So we always depict the negative sides of the society. Maybe I think that's the point. This point is the scariest things about the CCP. He just because actually we always use some symbol to symbolize what exactly the CCP did to their people, but we are not telling the story directly, but we just use we can say a powerful symbol to symbolize the point that how people suffer from the dictatorship. So I think this point is the most scariest things about of the CCP. So I think they think that our art poses a threat to them. Actually, I don't think our artwork is terrifying and pose any threat to CCP, but because they, as Lumli said, their hearts
are made of glass.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And we think that we just want to revealing the social reality. So if our government have done nothing wrong, why should they be scared? That is the question. So we hope that if the audience said our paintings are terrifying, but I could say social reality can be more terrifying than our paintings.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, and thank you. And Michaela, I mean, as an artistic director and as someone who's had to, you know, withstand pressure for your curatorial decision, what would your recommendations be to other artistic institutions in Europe to ensure that they can resist that sort of pressure and continue to, you know, what would be your sort of call to arms to your industry? Oh, you're muted. Sorry, Michaela.
Sorry for that. Not an easy question there, Nick. Just let me say one thing before I try to answer this one. Just going back to what Jens was saying and what we discussed before regarding Batu Cao and us trying to find a next venue for his show. I must say that as we speak now, there is Batu Cao's small exhibition in the European Parliament, and I'm very, very happy that we managed to find courageous European Parliament members who supported this and who, you know, gave floor to Batu Chao, and he could speak last night to wider audiences. And I just hope that he will find more open doors across Europe and across the world to showcase his art as other Chinese and Hong Kong artists. And to your question, this is a very difficult one because I am speaking here from the point of view of someone who is in charge of programming an independent institution, right? We are in a privileged DOX Center for Contemporary Art. We are in a very privileged position because we are not linked to any public funding. We are supported by people who understand how important it is to sustain the free artistic environment. So we can make these decisions and we can withstand these pressures. I can imagine that it can be a very different situation for public institutions, but nevertheless, I think that people who are in charge of cultural institutions should be aware that there are these pressures in the first place, and they should try to plan, you know, strategic planning in terms of whom do we connect with, where our funding comes from. You know, all this that has been mentioned here already plays role in how we can act when it comes to certain pressures. So the first thing I would say, make sure you do not enter these you know, tricky waters, these moving sands, these relationships with Chinese businesses, with Chinese state institutions. This is already very risky. So I think that, you know, then if you take care of this, if you look at who finances your practices, how you can, that really is very important in terms of how you can then resist any pressure. And I think in general, and this is very idealistic, but of course we should, especially after reading the report that you published today, and people, I just wish people in charge of artistic institutions and cultural institutions read this to realize what risks there are, and to find courage and to find the strength to say yes to artists, to exiled artists who try to speak openly and try to tell a different story than the one which is promoted by the CCCP, and say no to any such pressures as we or any other institutions out there have experienced.
Thank you so much, Michaela. Before I tag in Janet, just very quickly, just to say, if anyone has any questions they would like to ask the panel, you can do so in the question and answer function or the chat function, which is in the Zoom toolbar. Sorry, I don't know exactly where it is because I don't know which device you're using, but it is somewhere on the Zoom face. Sorry, Janet.
Yes, I would just like to reinforce and add to what Michaela is saying. It's so important. I really believe that we need to kind of rethink, redefine what it means to be a curator, what curatorial work is, by prioritizing, by centralizing this work, this skill of, of negotiating the pressures of censorship and self-censorship. It's not something that we traditionally learn, but it is something that we absolutely have to have today. And And so what does it mean? Absolutely, to have that preparation that Michaela's talking about, to have your trustees on board, to to have a plan in place so that you're not making a knee-jerk decision to cancel something or take a work down or whatever, and there may be times when you do decide to, that institutional self-censorship is the ethical decision. There may be reasons because you need to protect, let's say you decide that you need to close an exhibition because one artist has been targeted, and you don't want all the other artists to also be exposed, for example. So there may be some reasons for ethical self-censorship, but it needs to be very carefully reasoned out, and and this issue of who's actually being harmed, very carefully argued in a transparent way, because it's so easy to do such things out of fear. That's what censorship and self-censorship relies on. So the more we can prepare for this, the more we can train the next generations of curators to have skills in this area, the better off we are.
Thank you. I think that's a really powerful call to action for the role of curation within this conversation. Because as you say, if there are no rules in place and if everything's done knee-jerk, my gut feeling is that censorship is often the easier response. It's like you don't have a system in place, you're receiving this, as you were talking about earlier, controversy, so you will pull something to stop the controversy. But if you have a set of rules and a train, the system set up, you can better navigate with that. So Iverson, did you want to come in there as well? Sorry.
Maybe Jens, you can go first, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, you can go first. I can.
I can go first. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's right with this curator. They must have prepare what could happen with the foundation of an exhibition and this kind of thing. But I also think that the artists should to really think what happened after that, because in a way the artist standing there with nothing. So I think it's really important that the artist making powerful connection together and powerful political connection, because in a way the artists stand in front of the museum who have the exhibition. So my advice, don't trust the institution, don't trust the museum, because they have other rules, because they are maybe economical, they need economical support from a lot of the big sponsor. And the artists must be free. So I think the artists should really keep an eye on what happened with the exhibition around, and use it also as a tools against the institution, also the art institution, also against the curator, to say, you are now making self-censorship, you are now destroy the free speech in Europe if you do that and that and that. So I think that the artists must be trained to take this discussion in the public way and in the political way, and connect to a lot of powerful people in the country who could take this and stand behind the artist, and of course also the museum, if they are proud enough to go against CCP and this kind of thing.
By developing that active relationship between the institution, the curator, the artist, to encourage them to explicitly focus on freedom of expression, it's building that visibility of the threats to freedom of expression, as you mentioned in your earlier statement, but also unites those three bodies against censorship. And that could be a really powerful way of challenging these forms of tactics, whether it comes from CCP or other countries that are trying to censor art. Thank you, Jens. And sorry, Iverson.
Yeah, I want to follow up on the point regarding the role of a curator, as well as the fact that we tend to separate the arts and politics, because in the case I mentioned about Latvia, the official reason is about the deadlines, but it turns out to be false. And internally, the museum in Latvia, they told me that it was because of the government funding. They were afraid that, you know, what we were exhibiting wasn't connected to the purpose of the way they were using the funding. So I think there was a concern about actually the government relations. It was more about the relationship between the Chinese government and the Latvian government. And I think in a way that creates an issue for the creators. You know, we are getting, you know, let's say sidelined because they want to handle their international relations or diplomatic relations well. And I think we shouldn't be naive about that arts and politics are always connected. And I think the question is how we are getting better informed, making sure that the museums, institutions, as well as curators are understanding what's going on behind the scenes, so that we can build the capacity to resist this self-censorship and the censorship issues. And I think it is very important to build an alliance of people who are more connected to politics, for example, policy advocates, activists, as well as the artists, so that the artists understand what is the political context behind that. And on the other side, the policy advocates or the activists can understand what are the social awareness projects that have been going on, so that we can have more collaborations and we can, let's say, to maintain our artistic expressions and freedom of expressions in general.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So we've got some questions from the audience. I'll sort of scatter them in as I'm talking. So I'm just going to pull some in. So one question here is, the CCP has emphasized the importance of soft power and, quote, telling China's story well. But does critical artwork of the CCP help poke holes in this party narrative? And so, I mean, so is the soft power working or is it not? And you know, what is the role of critical art in challenging the CCP's narrative? Who would like to, would anyone like to take that question? Iverson?
Yeah, thank you. I think the CCP soft power machine is not working really well in terms of publicity when we see how aggressive the Chinese government is acting diplomatically. And also they have been trying to spread Chinese propaganda in Europe. And I don't think that the European audience would actually believe that there's anything true about this. But on the other hand, I want to give some nuances in this comment, is that China has been using a lot of, let's say, cultural issues like the Lunar New Year celebration, the traditional, let's say, East Asian cultures, as well as food, and trying to, you know, lure the foreigners in, like the Europeans who don't understand about East Asia, in so that they would have a perception that if you want to know more about culture and food and other things, you have to go to China. You have to appease China in a way that you don't want to mess up with them. But the reality is that a lot of things that the Chinese government or the Chinese cultural institutions have been claiming that the Chinese is actually East Asian or even Southeast Asian. So I think in a way that it has some success, but I think the most of the tactics are not actually working, because on the other hand, we see the Hong Kong resistance, we see Lumli Lumlong's protest arts, and trying to, you know, keep Hong Kong on the agenda, maintaining the Hong Kong cultural identity. And I don't think that the Chinese officials have the capacity to, let's say, to make people feel echo, make the European audience feel echo with all these issues concerned. I can give you some issues, for some examples. For example, in France, there's this this French lady who was waving the French flag. It's called the Liberty of the People. And in Hong Kong, there was a similar portrayed about the Hong Kong protester waving the Black Bohemia flag, and I think that echoes with the French heart. And Hong Kongers have also used the John Lennon Wall, which is connected to the Lennon Wall in the capital of the Czech Republic. Yeah, and also in Germany, there was a reference with the socialist kiss in the Berlin Wall, and the Hong Kongers were try to tease the Hong Kong political leader, former political leader Carrie Lam, and Xi Jinping's so-called socialist kiss. And I think all these artworks are actually, let's say, being the protagonists of, let's say, Hong Kong influence against the CCP within the European audience.
Thank you so much. And actually talking about how artists navigate the censorship landscape, Janet, you've written very compellingly about what you've sort of, I think, described as craftsmanship, as this as responding to censorship being an active role or an active process that artists have to navigate. Could you, I mean, for people who haven't read this, could you explain what this means and how artists have deployed this in sort of China, Hong Kong, and other areas connected to the CCP?
Well, my research from 2015 to 18 revolved around a research network that I convened at Chinese University of Hong Kong with my partner, Oscar Ho there, in which we gathered together Hong Kong and mainland China artists and curators. And we asked them how they navigated these issues. Certainly for Hong Kong at a time of vastly changing circumstances, and also for China in many ways. And one of the most striking things that was shared was when one of the Hong Kong artists and curators said that she wanted to learn what she called the craftsmanship of negotiating censorship and self-censorship, as a kind of resistance from her mainland colleagues, that they, for them, it was such a, it was just part of what they had to do in their work. That critical sensibility, not just a critical sensibility, but a way of working on the boundaries of pushing, but trying to figure out how to push just enough, but not too hard, but push just enough. So there was a recognition that things were changing in Hong Kong. And while Hong Kongers have their own culture, their own styles of doing things, still that there was a kind of networking, a kind of collaboration that might be helpful. And this was also helpful for all of us to see the kind of agency that was involved. So whether it's through, some of the kinds of things that that Lumli Lumlong were talking about, in terms of using homophones or language or memes or those kinds of things, or thinking about obviously changing venues, changing platforms, thinking about networking in new kinds of ways. There are, a million different tactics that artists and curators have developed to work kind of along these boundaries, where of course, at the same time, they're well aware that censorship itself cannot be limitless, right? You can't censor every single work that, so that the censors make it ambiguous on purpose. They make it random on purpose so that it might seem seamless, so that you never know when it's going to happen, so that you never know where that red line is. And so that the fears become so great that self-censorship, which is limitless, is what takes place. But the stories from all of these artists and curators about their own kinds of craftsmanship or craft work of resistance were so powerful that it very clearly showed that negotiating censorship and self-censorship, that C word doesn't mean silencing or passivity, that it absolutely can be a position of active agency.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And I think there's one interesting thing in talking about networks and that sort of creative response. And Jens, obviously, I remember I was living in Germany when I heard about the Pillar of Shame being removed from HKU, and it was unfortunately such a profound image when you saw it being moved. Could you discuss your feelings about the removal, but also how this has spurred on your new project to install it in other university campuses? Like, for example, the new campus in Budapest, and obviously Hungary has its own issues of academic freedom. Okay. How has that sort of creative process come about for you?
Of course, I have waiting. They must do something, because on this moment, all my friend in Hong Kong, also Albert Ho, who was my friend, was the first person who could take the Pillar of Shame to Hong Kong, and all these people was in jail, and I waited something will happen with the Pillar of Shame, because the Pillar of Shame in a way was the last man standing in Hong Kong on this moment. All the people who should take care of that was disappearing and go out to all over the world. So when they attacked it, they tried to write to Albert Ho in the jail. He's in jail now in Hong Kong, and write to them, if you should put this sculpture away before 4 days. If you don't do that, then this is a public sculpture and we can take it. And then we react really, really quickly and use we have a really, really big network, and take ownership. I take ownership over the sculpture, because I know the rules of private property is still intact in Hong Kong. So I said, this is my sculpture, you can't touch it. So then this would destroy the whole plan from the Hong Kong to move it. And then we attacked the lawyer firm, because the Hong Kong has a lawyer firm who called Mayor Brown, was an American lawyer firm. So then we have a decision, so we must attack something. We know we couldn't attack the Hong Kong government because it doesn't care with that. But then we attacked the firm, the lawyer firm, who making representation about the Hong Kong University. And this was quite successful. All over the world, people, even in the American Congress, they attacked this American firm, and they must close. We closed the firm in Hong Kong. They said they're giving up. So we make a new standard about what could American firm go to help CCP with making aggression against art in Hong Kong. And after two months, they take it down in the night. And of course, we were shocked they do that, but we have expect they will do that. So in a way, we have this plan I talked about already when we do that from the beginning. Of course, we know something will happen. We don't know when. We don't know nothing about the American lawyer firm. But we're making just a decision when we saw this from Americans. Like, okay, we could attack them, and this is the way I work in Denmark. We always use this situation as make a new kind of the story about the art. And now this is in the container is also a story, because it's a completely crazy story. The University of Hong Kong take the symbol of freedom of expression and then put it down in the steel container and close it and put it on the ground of university. It's nearly art they're doing, and it's completely crazy. So on the moment we work to get it out, it's not possible maybe, but we work on that, and then we make a decision to spread it out to all universities. So when we make copy of the sculpture in about 3 meters high, I think we have one in Prague together with Michaela. So then we put this into the university around the world. We try to do that, especially in this university who have Hong Kong students. This sounds strange but it's really, really important, because the Hong Kong students is a part of the economical base for a lot of universities in the world, and this is a big problem for the university, and they will destroy the academical freedom. So we try to make a attack and say, if you put this down there, then you make a discussion of what happened in China, and you use also a local discussion on the university, what happened between the Chinese student and the other student on the group. So we try to making this. We use the art. I use the art to put it into the discussion about academical freedom. So this is our new plan, and this is what we're doing in the moment. It took a long time to make it. We work for years for this kind of thing. We know that this is, but we work for that, and this is quite successful already.
Thank you, Jens. And I think it's a really powerful idea that even censorship is part of a story that needs to be told, and by telling the story, you can change its sort of message and use it to strengthen free expression as opposed to limit it.
Yes, we change the story with telling them. So yes, this is a trick.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much. So we have only about a few more minutes left. So I'm going to ask everyone in the panel just for like a last very short closing remark on what you would like to see improve for artistic freedom for Chinese artists, Chinese dissident artists, Chinese artists as exile, or any artist who's challenging the CCP, or at least trying to, support people of China. So maybe Iverson, if I could start with you first. So very short, just last thought, please.
Yeah, I think to conclude, I think we need to be courageous, regardless of what kind of role we are taking part in defending and exercising our freedom of expression in general. We need to, as I said, form an alliance across the spectrum regarding the academia, regarding the artists, and also the activists, and also politicians, so that we can be better informed. And we have to be aware that influence or even censorship, they are not really, let's say, measurable. It could be perceptual, and there could be indirect influences. And I think we have to take preventive measures against that. And we have to make sure that we are identifying all these issues that cannot be measured, because we have to address all this in order to maintain the freedom, so that we would not impose self-censorship without being conscious about that. I think that would be it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Lumli Lumlong, do you have any final thoughts?
Yes, we hope we can see Hong Kong liberated one day in my lifetime. Although sometimes we still have fear at the bottom of our hearts, we know that we understand that we persist, therefore we have hope. So we hope that every brushstroke in our paintings is a voice for the protesters. So we will keep on painting and exposing the cruelty of CCP, and we need international help. So please stand with Hong Kong.
Yeah, I just want to say it's such an honor to fight against the CCP with you guys, courageous people, and we need to stay together, and let's keep it together. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Janet?
I think that institutions in Europe and across the world also need to be more radically transparent about what they're doing, how and why in these efforts, so that And this is as opposed to what happens in China, and that this is absolutely central to erasing the kind of censorship and self-censorship that authoritarian governments are trying to impose.
Thank you so much. And Michaela?
Yeah, well, I would just like to say that on top of all that has been said, because I agree with all that has been said here, and just not to repeat, I think we just need to understand what is happening, and we just need to try to, all of us, I mean, both artists and institutions, we just need to stand firm and combat the fear from what could happen, because I think that's very important to understand that our fear is the great tool here. You know, I would like to just mention that, as I said, 33 years ago in our country, what happened, Václav Havel, whose name was mentioned here today, he was a prisoner day one. The next day, he was the president of this country that turned free through the Velvet Revolution. He was an artist. He was someone who decided not to fear, not to step away, even though he was threatened. He was jailed many times, and he didn't give up. And he, in the end, succeeded to lead this country to freedom. And so I wish that we all find this kind of strength in us to resist any sort of pressure that may come from whatever autocratic regime. So that's my hope and that's my wish for both the artists and the institutions.
Thank you so much. And Jens?
I'm quite sure the system will break down. One day, everything break down, also CCP and also China. You can see it already now. In the moment, there's a quite big reaction. And I think this kind of reaction, making your reaction and your reaction, maybe it take a long time. I don't hope, but maybe. And in the meantime, I work for my workshop to support the Chinese movement, and we will making a moving container exhibition around Europe, and make a presentation on what happened in China, and not but what happened with the art in China, but with a lot of artists who we're trying to invite to making this kind of exhibition, and we will start this exhibition in the European Parliament. So we work for that. We were not so quick because we need the pillar of shame to making the attraction for the exhibition. But if we get it out, then we will take not making exhibition about the pillar of shame, but we'll make an exhibition of a lot of people in the Chinese diaspora about artists what they're doing and what power there is in the work. This is what we're doing from my workshop.
Thank you so much. And thank you for everyone for attending. Thank you to the panel for your time and for your expertise. I think it's a really powerful and potent way of fleshing out what was included in the report. I'd ask everyone to check out the report. It's a really great piece of work. I can say that because my colleagues, John Merlin and Flo Marks, really pushed away on that. And all my colleagues also. I'm just going to say a shout out to Beda Yusal for the artwork on the report as well. And as Michaela pointed out, there's an exhibition at European Parliament as well, which is such a powerful venue. And Jens, it's great to hear that there's also looking at that for your forthcoming work. If you want to find out any more about Index's work or to donate to us, you can visit our website. The URL is in the chat. I also want to say a shout out to Jemima and Emma, my colleagues at Index, for helping, for leading on this event alongside everyone else here. But in the meantime, as Lumli Lumlong said, paint more and write less. I think it's a nice way of ending the call. So thank you, everyone, and have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much.